They are not watching you because they admire you. They are watching you because they are measuring how easy you are to bend. And if you think this world rewards kindness without consequence, you are already losing a game you didn't know you were playing. Welcome to American Wall Street. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep producing content that doesn't comfort you with illusions, but arms you with clarity for the real world ahead. Now, listen carefully. Most people walk through life believing they are surrounded by misunderstandings, bad luck, or unfair people. They think conflict happens accidentally. They think manipulation is rare. They think good intentions protect them. That belief is exactly why they get targeted. This world is not built on fair fights. It is built on psychological leverage, hidden behind smiles, compliments, and fake concern. Manipulators don't announce themselves. They observe, they calculate, they wait for signals, hesitation in your voice, guilt in your explanations, the need to be liked woven into your behavior. The moment they sense softness, they move. You were taught to be open, to be honest, to be agreeable, to explain yourself so others would understand. But no one warned you that in the wrong hands, these traits become tools used against you. Kindness becomes access, honesty becomes ammunition, openness becomes a map of your vulnerabilities. Niccolo Machiavelli warned centuries ago that anyone who insists on acting purely virtuous in a world that is not virtuous will eventually be destroyed. Not because they are immoral, but because they refuse to understand how power actually works. Survival does not require cruelty, but it does require awareness. Manipulators don't need to overpower you, they only need you to play by rules they secretly control. As long as you believe the game is about fairness, they will keep winning through strategy. As long as you think silence is weakness, they will provoke reactions. As long as you think explaining yourself is strength, they will keep pulling information from you. This is not about becoming ruthless. It is about becoming awake, about recognizing that morality without boundaries is not virtue, it is exposure. Power is not loud. Power does not beg. Power understands the terrain before it moves. From this point forward, you are not here to be liked. You are here to understand the game you are already in, whether you chose it or not. Because once you see how manipulation really works, you cannot unsee it. And the ending of this story is not about domination over others, but about never being owned again. Before we continue, here's a question for you. Think carefully and answer in the comments. Question: when people repeatedly take advantage of you, what do you believe is the real reason? A, the world is unfair and full of bad people, or B, you were never taught how power actually works. Comment A or B below. Most people believe power comes from what you say, how convincing you sound, or how strong your arguments are. That belief is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. In reality, power has very little to do with words. It lives in something far quieter and far more dangerous: your reactions. Manipulation does not begin when someone speaks. It begins when you respond. The moment your emotions rise to the surface, you have already handed control to someone else. Every defensive explanation, every rushed clarification, every visible flash of anger or guilt becomes usable material. Emotion, when displayed publicly, is not authenticity. It is data. And data, in the wrong hands, is leverage. Manipulators understand this instinctively. They don't push to convince you, they push to see where you flinch. A subtle insult, a passive question, a false sense of urgency. None of these are random. They are tests designed to measure how easily your internal state can be influenced from the outside. If you react, they advance. If you explain, they dig deeper. If you defend yourself, they know exactly where to apply pressure next. This is why the real battlefield is not the conversation, it is your nervous system. Whoever controls the emotional tempo controls the exchange. When someone can pull you into their timing, their urgency, or their framing, you are no longer choosing, you are responding, and response is always a weaker position than choice. Silence, in this context, is not emptiness, it is authority. The absence of reaction disrupts the manipulator's strategy because it denies them feedback. Without feedback, they cannot adjust. Without adjustment, they lose direction. What looks passive on the surface is, in fact, deeply active. It is the refusal to let someone else set the pace of your inner world. There is a reason powerful people rarely explain themselves in real time. Explanation signals that you believe the other person has the right to evaluate you. It places you beneath their judgment. Control begins the moment you stop needing to be understood immediately. When you allow space between stimulus and response, you reclaim ownership of the moment. This does not mean suppressing emotion or becoming numb. It means relocating emotion to where it belongs, inward, private, processed on your terms. Public emotion is exposure. Private emotion is strength. The difference is discipline. Once you understand this, the game changes. You no longer rush to correct misunderstandings. You no longer react to provocation. You observe. You wait. You decide. And in that gap between what is said and what you choose to do, real power is born. Manipulation survives on imbalance. One person acts, the other reacts. One probes, the other reveals. One applies pressure, the other leaks emotion. As long as this asymmetry exists, the manipulator stays in control. Your task is not to fight harder inside that structure, but to collapse the structure itself. This is where mirror defense changes everything. Manipulators hate seeing themselves. They rely on the illusion that they are composed, strategic, and invisible while you are exposed. The moment their behavior is reflected back at them without emotion, the illusion cracks. Not through confrontation, but through precision. When they speak in riddles, you don't clarify, you pause. When they ask invasive questions, you return the question calmly. When they push for reactions, you respond with neutrality. You are not mocking them, you are not challenging them. You are holding up a mirror and letting them face what they hoped to hide. Mirror defense works because manipulation requires momentum. They need to keep moving you emotionally forward or backward. When you reflect instead of engage, the movement stops. Suddenly, they are no longer leading the interaction. They are watching their own tactics bounce back toward them, stripped of power. Most people cannot tolerate this for long. They grow impatient, they escalate, or they retreat. In every case, control shifts. Alongside this comes the emotion vacuum. This is not coldness, it is containment. You do not display irritation. You do not perform politeness. You do not fill silence to ease discomfort. You allow stillness to exist. Eye contact without expression. Presence without reaction. This absence of emotional output creates psychological pressure that manipulators cannot navigate. They depend on feedback. When there is none, they lose their sense of direction. Understand this clearly. Your emotion is not the problem. Your emotional leakage is. Emotion vacuum does not deny feeling, it denies access. You feel privately. You process internally. But in front of someone who seeks control, you give nothing away. No tone shifts, no facial tells, no rushed responses meant to smooth tension. What emerges in that silence is revealing. Manipulators begin to talk more. They over-explain. They contradict themselves. They expose urgency, insecurity, or hostility they were trying to conceal. Meanwhile, you are not fighting. You are collecting information. This is the quiet reversal. You are no longer the subject being analyzed. You are the observer. Not by attacking, but by refusing to participate in their script. And once they realize they cannot move you emotionally, they begin to understand something unsettling. The game is no longer theirs. Manipulators are obsessed with speed.
not because they value efficiency, but because urgency short-circuits judgment. The faster they can push you to respond, the less time you have to think, and the more likely you are to step into a trap you never saw forming. Pressure is their accelerator. Time is your shield. Strategic delay is not avoidance. It is domination over tempo. When someone demands an immediate answer, but they are really demanding is control over your decision-making process. They want to occupy your mental space before you have the chance to evaluate their intent. This is why rushed decisions so often lead to regret. Speed kills perspective, and manipulators thrive in environments where perspective collapses. The moment you slow down, the power dynamic begins to shift. Silence after a message, a pause before responding in person, a calm breath instead of an instant reply. These small acts do something profound. They return time to its rightful owner, you. Delay creates psychological space, and in that space, people reveal themselves. A manipulator who believed they had leverage begins to feel uncertainty. They may follow up aggressively, they may soften their tone, they may attempt guilt or reassurance. Each reaction is information. Each attempt exposes how invested they are in controlling the outcome. This is why silence is not passive, it is surgical. It forces the other person to sit inside their own expectations without feedback. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with unanswered tension. The one who can tolerate that discomfort holds the advantage. When you delay, you are not freezing, you are watching. In face-to-face situations, the effect is even stronger. When confronted, most people rush to fill the gap with explanations, apologies, or emotional defenses. A strategic pause disrupts that script. The stillness unsettles. The other person begins to talk, justify, or escalate, and in doing so, they often reveal more than they intended. This is not about disappearing or playing games. It is about reclaiming authority over your time and attention. You do not owe anyone instant access to your thoughts. Availability is not generosity. It is a resource. And when you distribute it without discernment, you train others to treat it as cheap. Those who operate from real power move when it serves their strategy, not when they are summoned. They respond deliberately, not reflexively. They understand that timing is not a detail, it is the message. Once you master strategic delay, urgency loses its grip on you. Pressure becomes visible instead of overwhelming, and you begin to recognize a simple truth. The person who can wait is rarely the one at a disadvantage. Most manipulation is powered by a simple addiction, the hunger for validation. Approval, recognition, praise, and moral affirmation are not harmless social currencies. In the hands of a manipulator, they become levers, and as long as you are chasing them, you are not in control. There are two primary hooks. The first is praise. Excessive compliments, admiration, flattery framed as appreciation. It feels positive, but it carries a hidden cost. The moment you accept it emotionally, you feel an unconscious pressure to reciprocate, to agree, to comply, to maintain the image they have projected onto you. That obligation is the trap. The second hook is guilt. This one is quieter and far more powerful. It disguises itself as morality. After everything I've done for you, you wouldn't do this if you cared. Guilt forces you to defend your character rather than evaluate the situation, and once you begin defending, you have already conceded ground. Reward reversal breaks both mechanisms at once. Instead of feeding the behavior with emotional response, you withdraw it. You do not reject praise aggressively, you simply refuse to orbit around it. A neutral acknowledgement, a subject change, or silence communicates something far more threatening than resistance, indifference. It signals that your sense of value does not depend on external affirmation. When guilt is applied, you do not argue, you do not justify, you do not explain your boundaries. Explanation suggests doubt. Justification suggests weakness.
A calm refusal without emotional weight to something remarkable. It collapses the narrative that you are responsible for managing their feelings. This is where the power shift occurs. Manipulators expect reaction. They rely on it. When it disappears, the reward structure collapses. The behavior that once controlled you no longer produces results, and behaviors that produce no reward tend to escalate or die. In professional settings, this dynamic is especially visible. Someone takes credit, provokes tension, or subtly undermines you, expecting either confrontation or submission. Instead, you redirect recognition elsewhere. You withhold engagement. You deny them the spotlight without attacking them directly. The message is unmistakable. Attention is no longer guaranteed. Reward reversal does not make you cold, it makes you selective. Approval becomes something you give intentionally, not something others extract from you. And once people sense that validation must be earned rather than assumed, they adjust their behavior accordingly. The most powerful shift happens internally. You stop performing. You stop seeking acknowledgement. You stop negotiating your self-worth. In doing so, you become the frame others must orient themselves around. Control does not come from demanding respect. It comes from being the one whose attention, approval, and engagement are no longer freely available. Manipulators do not need your obedience. They need your coordinates, your intentions, your fears, your next move, your limits. Once they have those, control becomes mechanical. This is why clarity, when given too freely, becomes exposure. Information is not neutral, it is positional. Ambiguity armor exists to deny access. When you explain too much, you make yourself legible. When you offer absolute answers, you become predictable. When you disclose your plans, you give someone else the chance to interfere, redirect, or sabotage before you ever move. Manipulators thrive on this transparency because it allows them to act first while you are still deciding. Controlled ambiguity disrupts that advantage. It is not deception, it is discretion. You respond without revealing direction. You acknowledge without committing. You speak enough to remain present, but not enough to be mapped. Short answers, conditional language, intentional pauses. Each one removes certainty from the other side while preserving it within you. This uncertainty creates friction. Manipulators want clean data. They want to categorize you, label you, and calculate your behavior. When they cannot do that, their confidence erodes. They begin probing harder, asking sharper questions, applying pressure to force clarity. That pressure is confirmation that the armor is working. Alongside ambiguity sits a more advanced discipline, strategic ignorance, often misunderstood as playing dumb. This is not naivete, it is restraint. You see the manipulation, but you do not expose it prematurely. You do not correct every false assumption. You do not reveal that you understand the game being played. Why? Because exposure too early benefits the manipulator. It teaches them to adapt. When you appear unaware, they grow comfortable. They speak freely. They overreach. They leave a trail of behavior that can be observed, documented, and understood in full. Patience is the engine here. You are not trying to win the moment. You are trying to win the outcome. By withholding reaction and clarity, you allow the other person to reveal their structure, their motivations, and their limits. Meanwhile, you remain undefined. This discipline requires emotional control. The urge to clarify, to correct, to be seen accurately is strong, but every time you resist that urge, you gain leverage. Mystery creates distance. Distance creates power. When you master ambiguity and strategic ignorance, you stop being a surface others can write on. You become depth they cannot reach, not because you are hiding, but because you are choosing when and where to be known. The final source of power is not confrontation. It is independence. Manipulation collapses the moment the other person realizes you can leave and mean it. Not threaten, not negotiate. Leave. Most people stay trapped because they confuse attachment with loyalty. They argue longer than they should. They explain themselves endlessly.
They try to fix dynamics that were never meant to be fair. Manipulators depend on this persistence. They feed on your hope that things will change if you just say the right words or endure a little longer. Exit threat ends that illusion. This threat is never announced. It is communicated through behavior, through the calm absence of desperation, through the quiet understanding that your life continues with or without this person, this deal, this environment. When someone senses that you are no longer emotionally invested in preserving the connection at all costs, their leverage disappears. Detachment is what terrifies manipulators most. Not anger, not resistance. Detachment makes you unreadable. It removes the emotional hooks they rely on. You are no longer reacting to their pressure, their guilt, or their intimidation. You are choosing whether the interaction still deserves space in your life. In personal relationships, this often feels like silence. You stop explaining your boundaries, you stop defending your needs. When manipulation appears, you acknowledge it without emotion and withdraw your presence, not to punish, but because access is no longer guaranteed. That absence forces clarity. Those who respected you remain. Those who relied on control reveal themselves. In professional environments, exit threat is built long before it is used. You document your work, you build skills quietly, you expand networks without advertising it, you create options in silence. And when the environment becomes corrosive, you do not fight publicly, you leave cleanly, with dignity, with your value intact. This is not recklessness, it is preparation. The ability to walk away only works when it is real. Financial independence, mental resilience, a sense of identity that is not anchored to approval. Without these, exit threat is hollow. With them, it is decisive. True power does not cling, it chooses. It stays where there is respect and leaves where there is not. And when others realize that you are no longer trapped by fear of loss, the dynamic changes permanently. The person who can disappear without collapsing is the person who cannot be controlled. Power is not loud, emotional, or reactive. It is quiet, deliberate, and rooted in control. Throughout this framework, one truth remains constant. Whoever controls their reactions, time, information, validation, and ability to leave controls the dynamic. Manipulation feeds on urgency, clarity, emotional exposure, and dependence. When those supplies are cut, the game ends. You do not win by confronting manipulators head-on, but by becoming unreadable, unhurried, and unowned. Real strength is not domination over others, but sovereignty over yourself. And once you reclaim that sovereignty, manipulation has nowhere left to stand. Lesson and application. The lesson is simple but demanding. Stop outsourcing your power. In daily life, this means pausing before reacting, sharing less than you feel compelled to share, valuing your time, and building real independence, emotionally, mentally, and financially. Choose presence over performance. Choose boundaries over explanations. Choose long-term leverage over short-term comfort. Question for you. Do you believe personal freedom comes more from changing others or from mastering yourself? Please comment your view below so everyone can learn from different perspectives. If this content helped you think differently, consider subscribing to American Wall Street. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating deeper, more honest content in future videos.